Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our discussion of TradeLens this afternoon. I'm Mike White. I'm head of Maersk GTD, and I'm also co-leader and head of TradeLens from the Maersk organization. And I'm very pleased to be here today, and also extremely pleased to have my colleague Marvin Erdly. Marvin?
Yeah, hi everybody. Marvin Erdly from IBM's blockchain unit, and I'm the day-to-day leader of the TradeLens initiative for IBM. Mike's partner in crime.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you all. For those of you who were at Think last year, you might recall that we made a joint announcement about the joint initiative between Maersk and IBM to come together to help accelerate the digitization of global trade, to create more effective, more efficient, and more secure supply chains for all participants. And over the next 30 minutes or so, Marvin and I aim to give you an update on where we've been in that year, and most importantly, where we're going with the platform. And we'll show you a little bit of the demo of what we've built over the past 12 months. But first, if we start with the reason for TradeLens, the reason for IBM and Maersk to come together. Global supply chains are some of the largest, most complex ecosystems in the business world today. And it's not uncommon, for instance, to have up to 30 or 35 independent actors involved, over 100 people, and over 200 separate exchanges of information and documentation over an end-to-end supply chain. So it's complex and it's inherently inefficient in its current construct. And we know that it's a big business. Over $16 trillion a year take place in international trade, moving across borders, and 80% of that moves by containerized transport. And if you look at the opportunities that we have to improve global trade, and therefore global GDP, the World Economic Forum estimates that reducing trade barriers, getting more efficient, and lowering the barriers between individuals involved in global trade could actually unlock 15% improvement and growth in global trade, which makes the pie bigger for everybody. So we think there's the opportunity. Going into a little bit more about the challenge, a little bit more detail. From my background, over 30 years in the shipping and logistics background, seen firsthand that the challenges is that today information is exchanged in bilateral manner between shippers and their participants, either their suppliers or the transport providers, and information is often trapped in organizational silos, which means that there's two versions of what's going on. So often cargo is delayed, and certainly it's inefficient because cargo information is in one part of the supply chain and not the other. So that leads to challenges both in efficiency, also blind spots, which leads to gaps. Gaps lead to delays. Delays lead to increased costs for everybody involved. Additionally, the processes today are primarily manual in nature. A lot of information is keyed, rekeyed. It's time-consuming, it's inefficient, and it creates a lot of anomalies, a lot of exceptions, and each one of those have to be dealt with in a timely fashion to keep the cargo moving, to keep cargo fluidly moving from end to end. There's high compliance costs, and if you don't get it right, it impacts the flow of cargo. Customs clearance is a critical issue. Customs authorities around the world are trying to find better ways to assess risk, to try and make sure that they look at the shipments that are of concern to them or potential concern to them without impeding global commerce. And the current process is time-consuming. Customs is also trying to prevent fraud or identify potential areas of fraud and try to assess that earlier on. Risk assessment is a key component of that. But because of the current process being so manual in nature, because of these information silos, it takes time, and time can lead to delays and ultimately delay cargo and customs clearance and associated costs. So the operations are by nature today complex, and it restricts the ability from companies involved in supply chains to adequately understand their supply chains, understand when cargo is going to be delivered. So it's inherently inefficient. Companies have to have excessive buffer in their supply chain, and the cost of inefficiency is borne by everybody in the supply chain, but most importantly by the shippers who ultimately pay the cost of it. So the cost of global trade is exacerbated and increased because of these inefficiencies. So looking to the future, we see a different model. We see the opportunity for platforms to evolve. And platforms are not another application. Platform is a different business model, and it enables a one-to-many connection for all the actors, all the individuals that are involved in a global supply chain, instead of these bilateral communications and the challenges that we spoke to. So have everybody come together in an industry neutral, open platform for every participant. So that's the model that we're aiming to. That's what TradeLens is trying to work towards. Marvin will come up in a few moments and talk a little bit more about the specifics about the platform. But first, just where we've been over the past year. Actually, Maersk and IBM have a long history of working together, actually decades, with our respective organizations. And in March of 2017, we collectively came together to try and unlock some of the opportunities each of our organizations saw in terms of improving global trade through digitization. Through that proof of concept, we announced in January of 2018, and also at Think last year, the joint initiative having Maersk, the world's largest international container shipping and logistics company, and IBM, the technology leader and the leader in blockchain, come together to provide a new open platform solution underpinned by blockchain to help unlock some of the opportunities we see. In August 2018, we came together. We actually launched the name of this joint initiative. The TradeLens name was launched. Also, our product was available for limited availability, for trial of customers coming together to actually test the shipment, the process, and also participants coming in. At that point, we had 90 different participants hooked into the platform. In December 11th, 2018, we launched our first full general availability product, so the solution was available for all takers, and it's really started to progress from there. And in February of this year, we just announced some new enhanced solutions for permissioning of documents and helping customers actually take advantage of the platform in even greater ways. Again, the platform is the solution. It's the platform that comes together, but it's also underpinned by the network. So over the past year, we've been actively engaged, focusing on trying to bring together as many network members as we can. So as I stand in front of you today, we have over 120 participants. We've got about 65 different network members already fully on board, sending data into this platform. And we have a number of different documentation types, 18 different documentation types that are supported in either structured or unstructured fashion. Marvin will talk a little bit more about that when we get into the solution itself. And with this ecosystem, some of the names you'll see here of some of the participants who joined early, there's many more than this, but you can see there across the ocean carrier side, terminals, third-party logistics and forwarding agents, ports, other carriers, and also working with government agencies and customs authorities. So through this process, we're becoming increasingly data rich, and you can see that today, we're getting about 1.5 million updates, event milestones per day. That's over 500 million events into the system on an annual basis, and it grows as we add more and more network members. So we have 20 million containers of cargo information in the system today, which is roughly 1/5 of global trade, and it's growing week by week. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Marvin to talk a little bit more about the platform in detail. Marvin?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So what I want to do is I want to spend a few minutes on what it is we're actually doing with the platform. And one of the first things I usually tell people is that our goal is to digitize global trade. Now, that's a lofty ambition, but we're actually making significant progress through this platform to do exactly that. So what does that mean? Well, the first thing it means it brings the ecosystem together onto a common platform. And when I talk about the ecosystem, there are a lot of players in this ecosystem. There's the ocean carriers, of course. There's the BCOs and manufacturers and retailers that ship goods. There's the freight forwarders. There's the ports and terminals. There's customs and government authorities, inland transportation. So it's taking all of those actors in the supply chain and bringing them together. The second thing is it's all around sharing information. Mike mentioned already about the fact that there's lots of information out there, but it's all stuck in silos. So it's allowing them to come together and share that really critical information. And I'll go through in a second what that information is. The third is around collaboration. Now, if we've got the participants together, they're sharing information. Now it's about driving business processes, workflow, so that these entities can collaborate together. And then lastly, and I think this is where the real value is, it's driving true innovation across the supply chain. So if we've got a platform like this, and again, I will show you what that is in a second. We've got a platform like this, then we're in a position for everybody else in the industry to make use of that platform to really drive innovations. IBM and Maersk aren't going to do all of the innovations. We're trying to put together the platform, right? So that's a really critical piece of this. So real quickly, this isn't a deep technical discussion, but I just wanted to kind of lay the foundation of what this is. So first, in the middle, there is the platform. It's a set of services. There's blockchain behind it. It's the API that enables people to exchange information. Below that is what we call the network. Now, the network isn't it's not a physical network. It's the entities that provide the data and the data itself into the platform. So again, it's the ocean carriers, ports and terminals, customs, et cetera. They all provide data to the platform. And then, sitting on top of the platform is a set of applications and services. And again, not that IBM and Maersk are doing all that. We expect the ecosystem, ISVs and others, to be able to build based on standard APIs that are defined at the standard open, published APIs that are defined at the platform level, the ability for third parties, the network itself, ecosystem participants, and others to build value-added services and applications on top of that platform. So at a high level, that's the basic kind of model that we're moving forward with on the platform. Okay, so this really is a paradigm shift, if you will, in terms of how information is shared across the ecosystem. So when we talk about information, what is it that we're talking about that's going to be part of this platform? Well, first, it's the shipping milestones. It's the things like, has a container been stuffed? Has a container gated in? What is the estimated time of arrival of a container on a vessel, for example? But it's more than that. It's also the documents. And again, Mike mentioned how important documents were. Documents in both structured and unstructured form, right? Making that available to the supply chain. There is sensor data, IoT, for reefer containers, temperature, things like that. All of that are part of the underlying data that's made available. And it's made available to the participants who need that data. So there's a whole concept of a seamless and permission data sharing model that's built in, that's at the heart of the platform, that says, if we're moving goods from point A to point B, we know that we've got all these actors along the supply chain that are involved in the movement of that cargo, those set of containers. There's a model that's built into the platform that says, based on what your role is, are you a terminal? Are you an ocean carrier? Are you the shipper of the goods? What is the default permissioning model that allows people to share the information so that information is made available to those who need it, but it's not made available to those who shouldn't see it? So that's also at the heart of the platform. The other thing we're trying to do, it's all about industry standards, right? This industry has been devoid, those of you who are in the industry know, it's been devoid of standards to a large degree. So we're really trying to drive a standard data model. So the UN CFAC data model, for example, is a standard that we're building into the core of this platform. Also, how information is exchanged via these APIs, right? This is something that's been missing from this industry. So we're laying out and defining this API model that enables very easy ways for the ecosystem to connect and to share information. And we're making this API model freely available, right? This is not something that's proprietary, freely available to the ecosystem. And we really think, kind of sum this up, we really think that drives really a fundamental change around information, data transparency in the global supply chain. So just, I've covered some of this, but just really this is about a lot of the shipping milestones. We've built into the platform around 120 different industry standard shipping milestones, planned events, estimated events, actual events when they occur across the supply chain. The key thing in this platform, in this model, is that the information is immediately available. It's available in real time, right? So as a terminal publishes a piece of information about that, the fact that, for example, a container has been loaded onto a vessel, that then becomes immediately available to everybody else in the supply chain. And think about how important that is when things go wrong, when we say when a container gets rolled, right? The ability for everybody in the supply chain to have knowledge of that in real time and be able to react to that has really fundamental transformational impact on the supply chain. And then lastly, it's this concept, think if you're a large shipper, a large manufacturer, auto manufacturer, for example, you've got a very complex supply chain. You use lots of suppliers, lots of ocean carriers, lots of freight forwarders, you ship all over the world. The ability to have one consistent view of your supply chain, regardless of who your suppliers are, is a really, really, really powerful concept to the BCOs. And that's being borne out by a lot of the work that we've already done with a lot of these BCOs, or we call them shippers that are on the platform. Another kind of quick comment on documents. Documents are really, really important. You cannot get goods into and out of a country without the appropriate documentation for it. I won't go into all the details of that. But it's really critical that this platform, it's not just a simple track and trace, but it's also the ability to underpin by the documents and the information in those documents that can be shared. So our platform, by default, we've got 18 going on 19 standard documents. We've got a few flavor of a few of them there, certificate of origin, packing list. There's a whole ton of them, right? The platform supports that. It's built into the information and data sharing model. But more importantly, it's our movement to transitioning into structured documents. And when I say structured documents, it's no longer the PDF, a scan, an image. It's actually the data within the documents, because that's when this potential to transform the industry becomes very, very, very valuable, because people then have direct access to the data inside these documents that can be used downstream. And again, this idea of if as soon as a piece of documentation is available, that information is made known to those who require that information immediately, right? So they can react to that. There's no longer a delayed time, people faxing and phone calling to figure out where a document is. It's immediately available to the supply chain. And then one last thing I think I mentioned a bit earlier about this workflow. So this is one of the areas, and we'll talk about blockchain in a second. This is one of the areas where blockchain comes in. It's now we can, by definition, these documents need to change hands. They need to get approved. They need to get updated, right? To be able to build workflow using smart contracts for things like clearance, right? This is really, really powerful to be able to build that within blockchain using chain code to drive cross-organizational workflow. Okay, a little bit about, I mentioned blockchain once or twice, but I didn't really kind of get to why we're using blockchain. It really is, I always say, blockchain is kind of the secret sauce that makes digitization of the global supply chain possible. But it's really about the ability to trust the data that's on the platform. So we've got this concept of what we call trust anchors. You may have heard people use that term in the conference today, but they're really the operators of the blockchain nodes, right? And these trust anchors are the ones that ensure consensus is reached. So if anything is written onto the ledger, the trust anchors all ensure through our consensus algorithms that that information should be written and it's valid to be written to the blockchain. Auditable and tamper-proof. So as soon as a piece of data, again, let's just take one of the documents that we talked about earlier. As soon as some of that data is written to the blockchain, it cannot be edited, right? Any changes to that get in the form of a new version of the document. So it's fully auditable. And we'll show you, in the demo, we'll show you an application of that in a second. So it's tamper-proof and fully auditable. It's verifiable. So we write to the blockchain the cryptographic hash of the data that's part of the supply chain. So as people bring that data up, it's compared to the cryptographic hash is taken, is compared to the hash in the blockchain and compared. So we know definitively that data is what was written to the blockchain. And lastly, this concept of private data remains private. So we talked about this information sharing model. but with the ability for blockchain then to ensure that that data remains private, only accessible and available to the ecosystem participants that should have access to it. And then, and we'll show the platform in a second, but the last thing I wanted to talk about is kind of this notion of flexibility. It's actually very, and this is borne out by the work that we have done. Mike mentioned we have, quite a few hundred, over 100 participants already. It's borne out by the work that we've done. It's really easy to integrate into this platform. Use of these standard REST APIs, it's not a hard task. So we expect that most of the consumers of the information will integrate via APIs and use the information, publish it into their back-end ERP systems and other sort of systems. But we also have a web front end, which we're going to show you in a second, which also gives you visually allows you to look at the supply chain end to end. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for 3 minutes. We're going to show you a quick overview to give you, maybe solidify a little bit more what it is I've been talking about.
Every day, the world sees millions of shipping containers in motion. A minor miracle of logistics, coordination, and communication. But how well can you see the ones that matter most to you? TradeLens is a blockchain-powered shipping solution that brings unprecedented transparency, trust, and collaboration to global supply chains. TradeLens offers the oversight, control, and management every stakeholder in the supply chain needs. Ocean carriers, ports, terminal operators, inland carriers, shippers, freight forwarders, customs authorities, financial service providers, and more. TradeLens has a powerful API model, but it's easy to use the web interface to deliver value and insights right out of the box. To help illustrate the impact of TradeLens, let's follow 480 LED televisions from inland China through a series of events, including arrival at the port of Savannah to their final destination in Dublin, Georgia. TradeLens lets us find our container through a range of search parameters, such as equipment number, bill of lading number, booking number, and more. Viewing the container shipment card shows the important information related to the container shipment. In the transport plan, you can see the key milestones on the shipment's timeline. While this shipment contains over 50 events, TradeLens supports over 120 planned, estimated, and actual events, all tracked instantaneously, all viewable at the click of a button, giving detailed insights up and down the supply chain. Powerful filters can be applied to the events list, a capability that allows for isolating entries with document associations. Structured or unstructured documents can be uploaded or published to TradeLens by an array of providers. When this happens, an encrypted hash of each document is stored in the TradeLens blockchain. Perhaps the most significant aspect of TradeLens is the dynamic and sophisticated ability to control who has access to view and manage documents at each stage of a shipment, providing an encrypted audit trail of all critical actions. The benefits of TradeLens really deliver when the planned turns into the unplanned. At the early stages of this journey, an unforeseen circumstance leads to a change in the transport plan. Due to newly imposed draft restrictions, the carrier must discharge the container in Busan. From there, the container is booked upon a second vessel, lengthening the ocean voyage to Savannah by 36 hours. The carrier's decision has implications not just for them, but for all stakeholders further down the supply chain, from customs brokers, port authorities, and terminal operators to inland transporters and consignees. With TradeLens, changes to this shipment are reflected immediately, allowing supply chain partners to tightly coordinate actions, delivering the consignee's inventory in Dublin with 36 fewer hours than originally planned. TradeLens allowed near-instant logistical adjustments, so disruption was kept to a minimum. Global trade is an incredibly complex system, but with TradeLens and blockchain technology, we now have a trusted solution to support industry-wide innovation. TradeLens. Trade made easy.
Okay, I hope that kind of gave you a bit of a flavor for, for what we've put in place. That video demo really kind of got at the heart of a lot of the event and milestone tracking and the impacts of what happens in the supply chain if a container got rolled, as I mentioned earlier. It didn't really get into the documentation use cases, so I wanted to just spend another minute on that just to dive into that, and then we'll probably be ready to take some questions. So what you see here is the screen, is the main screen that you saw on the demo, and this is essentially the same consignment, the same shipment that was being tracked from China into Georgia. So if we're going to click on the Documents button, and then essentially all of the documents that are associated with that shipment, the packing list, pro forma invoice, and import declaration, all come up. And when you click on the import declaration, you see there's a version 2 here. Now, first we'll see you click on that. This happens to be an example of a document in a PDF unstructured format, right? So you roll down, and of course you can see the actual document here. You notice here in the green, that indicates that the hash of that document has been compared to the hash on the blockchain to ensure the authenticity of that document. Also, you'll note here there are 2 versions. So again, remember I talked about earlier the use of blockchain, making sure that we have an auditable record on the blockchain, on the ledger, that shows each and every version of a document. And again, it just doesn't apply to documents, but the information that's maintained on the blockchain. So let's take an example if we were to then create a 3rd version of that document. So we're just going to quickly choose and upload another version. I'll let that kind of play out as we go. And then what's going to happen is when that document is then stored to the blockchain, that's what happened in the background there. Another version came on, another link in the ledger, and again, the hash of that then is stored within the blockchain as well. We click on that, we do the integrity check to ensure that it's the right document, and now we've got 3 versions. So, and again, there's nothing, what I'm really trying to illustrate here is the fact that blockchain underpins this, that all parties in the supply chain that have the permissions to see these documents now have direct and immediate access to those documents, and they've got assurances that what they're looking at was the version of the document that was submitted. And this is really, really important to many, many actors in the supply chain. Think of customs authorities, for example, needing to ensure the authenticity of the documents that they're looking at. What we'll do here is we'll just take a quick look at what it looks like when we're moving from into structured documents. So we'll take a version of a commercial invoice. We'll create a version of that commercial invoice using a structured format, meaning it's not uploading of images, but what we're actually looking at here is all of the data associated with a commercial invoice. So what we're looking to do is using industry standards to define and move the industry towards the use of standard JSON definable documents that all of the industry knows and uses. Now, we know we're not going to get there overnight to define every one of these fields for every type of document. And we also know that the documents vary around the world. So we've built a capability into the platform to be very, very flexible in terms of how these documents are defined, but making sure that that information is available to everybody in the supply chain who requires it. So that's a quick overview. We really wanted to make sure we left enough time to to answer your questions. Really the key point I want to kind of leave you with. Number one, it's about digitizing the global supply chain, right? Number two, we've got a platform. It's up and running. We've got many, many members that are on it now. As Mike mentioned earlier, over 1.5 million events are being uploaded by the various actors in the supply chain per day. So that platform is up and running. And we believe we're really setting the stage for a fundamental transformation in the industry with this platform. I think we have 10 minutes? All right, well, perfect amount of time for questions if we have any.
One in back.
Hi. Hello.
Yep.
Hi.
Hello.
I would like to know how do you manage the quality of the information that you're registering into the blockchain?
Yeah, good question. The short answer is we're not managing the quality, right? We ensure that the data is in the format that's needed, but whoever is publishing that data, we make that available to others in the ecosystem by default in the platform. Now, we certainly see an opportunity. We talked about the value-added services and the applications that sit on top of that to create some value-added services and others to look at the data and say, well, this estimated time of arrival doesn't make sense because it's actually already arrived. You know, things like that. But the philosophy, the fundamental philosophy of the platform is that data, we try to get data from the source, from the originator of that data, and then we make that data available to others. We aren't currently trying to say, oh, this makes sense or it doesn't, although we certainly see, as I said, opportunities down the road for ourselves and others to do exactly that.
Just adding to what Marvin said, it's an intentional choice, having spoken with customers in this proof of concept period, that they really wanted to see the information that they're getting from various suppliers. So it comes in, it's not up for us to make a judgment. We can develop AI tools that could sort of determine which one is the most likely answer, but they want to understand if they're getting gate information from a forwarder or a carrier and a terminal operator, you know, what is the time, what is the date and timestamp, and when are they sending that, so they can actually understand the accuracy and timeliness of information that they're getting from their providers. So we can build in tools afterwards, but for right now, it's a platform, it's a repository, and as Marvin said, to the greatest extent possible, it is populated by whoever is in physical control of the asset. So that way, we believe that there's better data integrity already, and also the timeliness should improve through APIs.
Thank you.
Thanks. The concept of structured documents is similar to EDIFACT standards, right? So what do you think is going to be the challenge to reach out to a standard definition of a commercial invoice or shipment status update in the industry?
Want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so there have been efforts to try to standardize using EDIFACT and other standards. We think that the UNCFACT kind of model that's grown out is really a strong model to base, I would say, the next iteration of the industry standards through a JSON model. As I said earlier, there's not going to be one common standard for every one of those 18 documents, right? But we do believe there's basic standards that we can apply to the majority of these types of documents around the world. But we do understand it's going to vary from time to time.
Yeah, so getting documents in the same format for EDI transmissions or now API transmissions helps, because now you're starting to get, you know, information available, not only the milestones but the documents, but truly digitizing it, getting into a format where it can be then used by different entities. For instance, to start the customs clearance process. Having grown up in this industry, 30+ decades in the business, just seeing how many times the same information has to be rekeyed for different elements using the same basic blocks. If we can get that data in a structured format so it goes through, it makes it more efficient from everybody. So data that's captured upstream is better used by people downstream. Again, for permission parties only who should have access to the information.
Thank you. So my question is, what is the trigger event for a shipper to move to TradeLens? They can today go to Maersk site or other sites, right? And if you look at the industry, if I am the carrier, the shipper may not actually know the key IDs or tracking numbers. It's the freight forwarder who will know that, right? So how do you resolve that challenge of making information available to people who need it?
Yeah, at the outset, we try to define all the parties to a transaction that comes in through a shipment. The initial solution that we have up starts with the movement of the empty container. So once the empty container is moving for positioning, subsequent to the booking, getting that information started to everybody who's party to that shipment. So there's some upfront work that we do with the customers, onboarding them, not only their suppliers, but other permission participants throughout that, and that could be forwarders or different forwarders depending on the geography that they're working with, customs brokers, and other third parties. So they help us define that, and we capture that information, and as soon as we get the initial movement, it starts moving through. So everybody who's a party to that transaction can see the information more in a more time and cost-efficient way.
Yeah, and it's a good question, because in some cases a freight forwarder is acting as an NVOCC. We are working with freight forwarders, right? We are working very closely with the freight forwarding community to ensure that we've got a model that's going to support not just, that supports the NVO model. And in fact, we're doing a lot of work with the platform now to work with how do you define a consignment in a way that deals with the multiple parties that could get the goods from point A to point B.
Yeah. And essentially, a 3PL, a freight forwarder, could be an agent of the shipper, or they could be moving their own cargo, as Marvin mentioned. So there's different opportunities where sometimes they're a network member providing data, other times they're a full client of the solution.
And the second question I had was, so they already have access to this data through Maersk platform, right? So what would make them move to TradeLens? Like, what is the trigger? What you have seen which will make them move?
I think it's an excellent question. So I'll start first. From my perspective, and more importantly from the customers we're talking to, two very significant issues. For the first time ever, you have an amalgamation of shipping event milestones coming together with documents all in one place for everybody involved in that shipment to see it. So it's this platform network event, so everybody who's involved can see it as it comes real time. So everybody has access to one version of the truth, underpinned by blockchain. So everybody knows that the document they're looking at is the latest document, the hash has been married to it, so it makes it verifiable. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is, in addition to the fact that we have 121 milestones and 18 different types of documents, structured or unstructured, that we can handle, which most carrier platforms do not have. In addition to that, putting it in structured format enables this downstream use of data. So not just, it's a huge advantage having even an image of the document along with the event information at the same time can prevent delays or at least minimize the impact of delays. But then putting it in digitized fashion means that you get the workflow processes that can really improve for everybody.
Yeah, and then one quick point I want to make on this is not a Maersk product. This is an industry product. Yeah. Maersk Line, right, your liner business, is a network member, just like other network members, just like other carriers. So those shippers now have a consistent view of all of their data, regardless of who carries it, right, or regardless of who the inland transportation provider is. Now, of course, we've got more work to get the full network on the platform, but we're making significant progress there.
Yeah. More information from a broader spectrum. Yes, one over there. Do we have time for one more? Yeah.
It's a quick question. Is this a distributed ledger or a centralized ledger? Who owns the ledger?
Marvin?
So it's Hyperledger Fabric. It's a permission blockchain. Maybe I should have mentioned that a bit earlier. So all the participants are known. They're onboarded entities into the network. And then we've got a set of members that run the nodes. And right now, the way we've laid out that blockchain topology, it's centered around the ocean carriers. So the ocean carriers are what I mentioned earlier are the trust anchors. They're the ones that run and operate the blockchain nodes and participate in consensus. Okay? We finished? Yep. Thank you, everybody.
All for your time and attention. Come see us at booth 535.